Hey, Foot Clan. Today's show is brought to you by PristineAuction.com. Look, you've got to go check out PristineAuction.com. They have the absolute best autographed memorabilia collectibles. It doesn't matter what kind of level of collector that you are. You will find something you love there. They're good friends of the show. I was on there today and saw 3 different Lev Bell jerseys. So if you listened to our show last time, you know you can go on, get your Lev Bell jersey, put it on your man cave wall. There's hundreds of daily auctions to check out. So head over to PristineAuction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Oh, if only it were true. If that introduction were true.
Mostly true.
Well, it spoke of a man who is not here today.
A man who suffered some battle damage.
This is a sad tale. If you're watching the video, you see already that Jason is not here. It is Andy Holloway and Mike, the Fantasy Hitman Wright, a 2-man band today. Jason's down.
Man down.
Man down. We had you've heard us talk about it before. We play flag football. We had a game last night. We won the game. Jason plays on the offensive line, and unfortunately...
He's the beef up front.
He's the beef. Okay.
He puts it to good use.
We now know how this show is going to go. So he is down because he was gouged in the eye.
Dirty. They did him dirty.
It's not good.
No.
And I had to drive him home, and he thought he'd go to sleep and wake up fine, and not the case.
Nope.
So he's out today.
Searching for an optometrist, I believe.
Yeah, he is. We'll have an update. We'll have a breaking news. If we get anything from him, any news on the injury report, we will.
Here's what we know.
Questionable.
Jason, next week on the show, could be a pirate. He very well could be a pirate.
That's been the hard thing, is the compassion of a friend versus the desire for the show to be more entertaining. Because if he's wearing an eye patch, at that point you're doing us a favor. I mean, who doesn't go subscribe on our YouTube channel if he's wearing an eye patch?
Sure. The fantasy pirate, Jason Moore.
It would just be.
And the second thing we know, I have moved over to Jason's spot for the YouTube for the camera. I don't think I'm going back.
Well, hey, look.
Nobody puts the hitman in a corner.
I'll tell you what.
That's what
right
Patrick
now.
Swayze would say.
You know Jason's weakness at this point. If you guys have to go head-to-head.
Go for the eye?
Go for the eye. So. We are here. It's Thursday, March 31st. We have a good show. If you listen to us on Tuesday, you heard our first 6 running backs, very early running back rankings. We all have our running backs statted out. If you don't know how we do our rankings, we project stat lines. We let the chips fall where they may, and then what you're getting here on the show is the consensus rankings of all 3 of us. And so we have 7 through 12 today. Are you excited?
I am super jacked.
Normally, these shows are even more fun because it's not a surprise. There's not a lot of debate when you put a Le'Veon Bell at the front. Obviously,
right.
We did get some feedback about the David Johnson consensus number 2.
Hey,
he's number 3 for me, but
that's the way it is. Well, and people were curious because we put a poll out that said, who are you most excited for? And it was David Johnson, Gurley, Peterson, and Jamal Charles. And people were like, where's Lev Bell? Like, he's the best.
Yeah, it's
he's
hard
he's not on the list because he's the best.
Every name on today's list that you will hear us talk about is somebody that you could make, different arguments for, that you will probably hear us make different arguments for, depending on where we have them compared to one another. So I'm excited about that. We got the mailbag on the show, some voicemail questions, some listener questions. So you want to stay tuned for that as well. Got a good quick question. But first, I want to let you know how you can find us on the web, thefantasyfootballers.com. That's where you can submit questions. We got a lot of cool stuff going up on there, including, I'm going to let you know right now, we have been working on a draft board document, a free tool for listeners, for anybody who plays fantasy football. A lot of the times I hear this. I can't quite run the league that I want to run through ESPN or NFL.com or Yahoo, and it's not really those places' fault because we all run different customized leagues. And so if you do a live draft, this is the draft document that we use to kind of make it easy to plug in draft picks, to keep track of trades, teams, all that stuff. So we've done some work on that. That'll be up on the website soon under the tools section, so you want to check that out. Just a free resource for you. And you can find us on Twitter at the FF Ballers. You can follow Mike at FF Hitman. Follow Jason at JasonFFL. Send him some well wishes. And then you can follow
or pirate jokes.
Either one. Either one. Pirate. I want to know.
Flood his inbox
what do we
with
get?
pirate jokes.
Do you get more well wishes or more pirate jokes? And then you can follow me at Andy Holloway. We're also on Patreon. JoinTheFoot.com. You can hop on there. And we just put up our Foot Clan League. The other thing people say a lot is, how do I get into a great league like you guys? And we said, you know what? We'll help you out. So if you're a JoinTheFoot.com member, you can actually get access to some forums with only members and then join great leagues together. And it's pretty cool. People have been jumping all over that ever since we put that up yesterday. So good stuff.
Let's do it.
All right, quick question. What kind apparently we didn't talk enough about Martellus Bennett is what I've heard from people.
Yeah,
and that was intentional.
There was some feedback, and I felt like we had given everything we had to give on Martellus Bennett, but so we said, okay, we'll focus an entire quick question on Martellus Bennett,
the New England Patriot. Martellus Bennett.
And I'm going to ask it today. What kind of an impact will Martellus Bennett make fantasy value / impact on others?
So how does he impact Brady and Gronk and Edelman, and then is he worth a pick, basically?
Absolutely.
So let's not forget, he is 2 years removed from a 90-reception season, had up 916 yards, 6 touchdowns, really was a reliable tight end in the fantasy world to a high-end tight end. Not so much last year. So what does he have left, and what is his role in that offense?
Very little. I mean, we've seen the
dominant analysis from Mike, the fantasy man.
We've seen what the Patriots do for guys who are not Aaron Hernandez. We saw it with Tim Wright. We saw it with Scott Chandler. These guys are going to come in.
Zach Sudfeld.
Well, Sudfeld was supposed to replace Gronk for a couple games. So Bennett will come in. He'll catch a couple touchdowns here and there. He is not a tight end one. He is maybe a streamer if you're in dire straits. And there's also the handcuff Gronk. Do you want a handcuff Gronk argument? To me, no, not even a consideration. I'm not clogging up my bench with Martellus Bennett
because that argument would be the same as Scott Chandler last year, and you wouldn't have thrown Scott Chandler in your bench all year.
Held him all year long just in case Gronk goes down for a guy who will not replace even 75% of Gronkowski.
This has been an offseason where you've seen so many prolific tight end type of signing or ideal situations, right? Kobe Fleener leaves, so Dwayne Allen has some relevance. Kobe Fleener has a lot of relevance.
We call that the 2-for-1.
Yeah, you've got Zach Ertz that could step up this year. Martellus Bennett or Jared Cook?
We were a good friend of ours on Twitter, Matt Harmon, had retweeted, I believe, his friend over at NFL.com, Alex Gellhard. They were talking about Jared Cook scored 8 touchdowns in 3 years with the Rams. Could he score 8 touchdowns this year with the Packers?
What, did he convince you?
No, we haven't talked about this. I talked about it with Jason the Pirate a little bit, but what's your opinion on that?
6.
6?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we looked it up, and what the tight end, his name is escaping me right now.
You're talking about Richard Rodgers?
Yeah, Rodgers. Rodgers had 8 touchdowns
right, and that's
year.
why I said I don't want to say no, but you're not going to have reliability out of Jared Cook.
Yeah, I'm going with neither.
Well, and Jared Cook has I think a contractual requirement to disappoint fantasy owners for years.
If I have to choose between the two, I'll go with Bennett.
All right, that's interesting though, because Bennett's the second tight end versus the
Cook's not the second tight end.
I think Cook's the first tight end.
Ooh, he supplants Rodgers immediately.
So you just thought he came in same situation. I think that he's just more athletic, better player. Sure. Richard Rodgers was the product of no Jordy Nelson, struggling Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams stinks. I think, at some point you just got to throw to somebody who's going to catch it. So, yeah, not excited about either guy, not targeting either guy. And so let's we don't really have any big news.
Nope, let's go to the running backs.
Let's just jump into the running backs.
running backs.
All right, Lev Bell was the number one consensus. We had David Johnson 2, we had Todd Gurley 3, Jamal Charles 4, Adrian Peterson 5, and we finished up with Mark Mark Ingram. I feel
like Mark Ingram at 6, which is I fully take responsibility for his.
You're
being
the
that
one
high.
who pushed him up in our
I
consensus.
think that's the hottest take of those top 6.
Not David Johnson.
No, not at all. I just feel like if you look around with what other people are feeling from the fantasy football community, David Johnson is considered a top 4 guy by most. So to me, Mark Ingram at 6 is kind of the boldest statement that we've made.
All right, so number 7's a guy that I think I'm responsible for pushing him to number 7, and that is Lamar Miller, the new running back for the Houston Texans, a guy who has been perennially a underutilized running back, which, let's be honest about that. In fantasy football, when that takes place, people tend to project stat lines across heavy workloads. And they say, okay, you've got 200 carries, and you did this, so give him 300 and he'll do this. But that's not how it works. And so what kind of a workload are you, one, expecting from Lamar Miller? And is he worthy of this spot in the top 12?
Absolutely he is. To me, I expect a huge workload. We saw in 2013, only 13 games. This is only 13 games for Arian Foster under Bill O'Brien, the current head coach. 260 carries in 13 games. O'Brien, if you
for
watch
Foster, right?
And but that's why I'm moving that over. Not saying that he's going to get that much. Miller will have that many carries, but I'm saying O'Brien will give it to one guy. If you watched him in Hard Knocks, it was great to see the behind the scenes of O'Brien talking to all his staff and talking to Hoyer. He's saying, "Look, if you're concerned at all, if something looks weird, just give the ball to Foster. Just please give the ball to Arian Foster." And I believe that's exactly how he will feel with Lamar Miller. Now, what's interesting about Lamar Miller, only three of the top 14 running backs in standard last year, so they finished the top 14, had under 200 carries. Only 3. David Johnson, Danny Woodhead, Lamar Miller.
And Miller was at, 194?
Was that? Yes. 194. So, and he was very productive. He's been very productive throughout his entire career. The question has always been workload. Why won't they give it to him? We've seen multiple coaching staffs come in and say, we don't think he can handle it. At least that's what their play calling said. But the Texans are going all in. They gave him the money, like they're going to give him the ball that many times. And he had the best catching season of his career. And that's crucial. We've kind of talked about that a lot with our top running backs, is you want a guy who's going to catch the ball at least a good amount, because it's for a guy to be just in on first 2 downs, it's very difficult for you to become a running back 1.
And obviously you have Brock Osweiler coming into that offense. You have an offense that is traditionally been run heavy. They control the ball. They try not to make mistakes, and they have a defense that was pretty much the most dominant defense other than maybe Denver towards the end of the year. They were, by many metrics, better than Denver at the end of the year. So the arguments are there. I have him at 4. Okay? Yeah. And the reason being is I have him moving that reception total from 47 receptions up into the 60s. Or into the low 60s, high 50s. Okay. And that's just from workload, being on the field more. They pass to the running back a lot. That's something we saw with Arian Foster. All that being said, if I wanted to acknowledge a potential problem with Lamar Miller, it would be goal line. Is there a reason that they would go away from him in the goal line because he's so predominant on third down? He should be the guy out there all the time. So does Alfred Blue or somebody else become?
I will calm your worries
by saying the name
Alfred Blue.
They like him.
Well,
they like him like the Packers like James Starks, where you roll your eyes when you've got Eddie Lacy and you're kind of like.
They like him the same way like I say hi and I'm friendly to the post guy. I'm going to be cordial. We're going to have a nice, small, limited interactions, and we're going to be friendly. That's the Texans with Alfred Blue.
I don't know. Sometimes I see these guys that so Blue has to come in year after year for Foster, and and grind out 25 carries at 1.2 per carry. And they just pat him on the back and they say, you know what, you go get the touchdowns a few times. That would be the one worry. Now, Lamar on limited carries had 8 touchdowns last year. It's a hard to predict area. What do I have him projected for here? I have him at 8 this year. So I don't think I'm being outlandish. I think it's the difference maker that makes Lev Bell so high, David Johnson so high, and Jamal Charles. It applies to Lamar Miller. And so what it does say by having him at number 7 is that he is ahead of several names that we're about to get into.
Yes.
And so we can compare, contrast. Let's go to number 8. Everybody's favorite number 1 running back, Devonta Freeman.
Yeah.
Look, you've had moments. You and Devonta are a little bit more familiar with each other than
I
the
would
postman.
say, yeah, I would say my connection with Freeman is not as friendly as my local post carrier. Look, man, he's still high on my list. I have him at number 10, so I'm not completely writing him off. But the deal,
Now, you have an interesting stat here about him.
So here's my problem with Devonta Freeman.
He stinks. Oh wait, that was last year. Sorry.
Yeah, that was. I won't go that bold. However, weeks 3 through 6. So Coleman was the starter. Weeks 1 and week 2 broke the rib. Freeman came in. Weeks 3 through 6, he put up 50% of his fantasy production. 50% in 4 games. Which that was great. That was that was awesome. If you had him for those 4 games. However, there's a lot of season left there for half of your fantasy production to come in those games. You've heard me talk a good bit about guys, how they faced against a base defense. Devonta Freeman had a 3.6 yard per carry average against base defense. Tevin Coleman, 4.5 yards. To me, Coleman's a second-round pick. He had the starting job coming into the year last year. I have to think he gets more involved. I don't see any way that Freeman has the workload that he had last year. With that said, he will be the pass catcher. He was very solid in that role. So the volume will be there for him to still be an RB1, but I don't think you're seeing top 5 numbers like you did last year.
Where do you have him in your rankings?
10. He's 10.5 point PPR.
Okay. And I have him, let me see here. I've got him at 9. So we both have him a little bit lower than where he is in the consensus, which by process of elimination tells you that Jason is obviously very high on Devonta Freeman.
And he is.
I will say this, though. It is difficult to, and again, nobody's really, when you got a guy ranked 7, you're not dogging him, right? Like he's a good player, and he will be a fantasy relevant player.
He's 8 for us.
So here's what I do say. Just because he put up 50% of his production in those 3 weeks, I don't want to hold that against him. It shows me that he's a guy who can put up incredible numbers when the chips fall the way they should. That offense was, if you looked at Matt Ryan in the Shanahan offense year 1, I think there was a blurb today that he's holding like a players only passing camp or something to try to, he's got to do something to get that offense going. And they added Mohamed Sanu. Maybe that'll help. A healthy Tevin Coleman, a non-fumbling Tevin Coleman would help. An offensive line would help. A lot of things would help. All that being said, Freeman, I'm not going to really, that 3.6 versus the 4.6 with Coleman. Coleman had limited work.
Yeah, no, it's a smaller workload.
I'm not going to count that against Freeman too much. I'm just going to give him a pretty clean slate to come in and, if he did what he did from week 7 on, we'd still be saying he's worthy of a pick in the top 10.
Yes.
Right?
As running back, so you're saying like a top
even if you took his week 7 through the end of the year, that was what we expect from him every week. You'd still be seeing workload and pass numbers.
I didn't calculate that out, so I'll
he had 73 receptions last year, and that's really where you just need to. Even if you don't like any other number, just go sit inside of that number and just smile because that's great. Half point, full point.
That's how Danny Woodhead is an RB1 every year when he plays 16 games.
Yeah, the passing game is huge, especially because there's not a lot of workload backs.
Yeah.
Heavy workload backs. So you're looking for guys that do both things. So where are we at? We're
number 9.
Number 9. And that's Doug Martin.
He's back.
Best case scenario for Doug Martin was staying in Tampa for a fantasy. Would you agree?
Maybe.
Other than Dallas.
I'll throw the Dallas out.
So you would have been higher on him in Dallas.
I would have.
Yeah, because he would have been paid. So You'd been going in expecting workload numbers there, and then just the offensive line. But
and
I like him. I like him a lot. He's my number 5 overall in standard. He's 6 in PPR for me. He represents a baseline that I feel is pretty safe.
Yeah.
In Tampa, you got an offense that is, you're maintaining. You got Cutter that came up to the head coach. Winston's maturing. I don't, you see some stability even though the team isn't elite. They still competed last year. Martin put up huge numbers. So I've got him projected for that, 1,400 yard range again. Not somebody catching a ton of passes.
Yeah, because Charles Sims
maybe 25-30.
Charles Sims, his backup, is a great third down guy. Charles Sims will be on a lot of my teams. I think he's going to be a running back you can get very late, who, if something happens to Martin, Charles Sims will be a fantasy beast. What I really liked about Martin, when you're breaking down his numbers, he was a top 5 fantasy producer, the only one of the top 5 without double-digit touchdowns.
Which is great.
And as we say, touchdowns are the hardest thing to predict. There's so much variance year to year of did they go down at the 1 and they get to punch it in. Just a whole bunch of complicated factors go into a guy like LeSean McCoy having bajillion touchdowns to going to 3 the very next year. These things happen, but yardage tends to remain pretty consistent. So
and that 288 carries. I mean, he had no week without double-digit carries. He had the ability. He went out in week against Philadelphia, 27 for 235. So he can give you that monster week. He had 6 touchdowns and put up a top 5 season. So even if his average went down or the carries went down a little bit, maybe Winston's throwing a little more in year 2, I'm not that worried because what does that mean? That means maybe the offense is moving through the passing game. He gets another goal line carry to make up for a few of the carries that he would have had. I like him. I just think he's really a foundational back. I would have no problem with somebody who said, I'd rather take Doug Martin than I would Jamal Charles. I'd rather take Doug Martin than I would David Johnson.
What's weird for me is, watching him play, digging through the numbers, through the metrics, it's still difficult for me to get on board with him as a top 5 type of guy. Maybe it's just the burn. It could be the burn wounds from the back-to-back horrific years where he killed you. He was a bust as a second-round pick, and then he was a bust as a fourth, fifth-round pick. So maybe it's that. Maybe I'm letting that influence me too heavily, but it's just for me to put him up in that top 5, I just can't do it.
Okay. All right. And I have him right there at 5. So I'm a big fan of Doug Martin this year. I'll have him on probably a few of my teams for sure. All right. So let's talk about number 10, 11. There has been some flip-flopping on these two guys in our rankings. I'm sure there will be more change. Shady McCoy.
If you're in the club, keep your guard up.
Shady's coming.
Keep your guard up because he's coming for your face. Coming for those pearly whites.
Oh, come on. LeSean McCoy. Let's talk about the player, not the person. The player is, at times, you made a trade in the middle of the season to acquire LeSean McCoy last year. LeSean McCoy gives you heavy workload numbers when he is healthy. That is the problem.
Yeah, well, he's been a relatively healthy guy, and we knew.
Oh, that's
what?
That just doesn't ring true to me.
Before this year, he was coming off back-to-back 300 carry seasons.
Yeah, but we are coming off this year.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, and his was.
He's got 1 year in Buffalo, and I just seemed like he was on the injury report every single week
because he
played hurt. You got Carlos Williams behind him.
The nice thing about LeSean McCoy's injury is you knew coming into the season that there was going to be a problem because he had the severe tear of his hamstring right at the beginning, so he missed time, and you knew what you were in for with LeSean McCoy. If a player severely tears their hamstring in training camp, it's going to be a problem all year. It's going to be a
long-term.
All year.
Well, he had the knee issue too, though.
But I feel like that's all connected.
Okay.
Once you hurt your hamstring, everything is downhill from there.
The knee bone's connected to. So here's the thing about McCoy. He did receive over 200 carries in 12 games last year. He obviously catches the ball. He had 30 receptions. I would expect, when you saw him on the field healthy, they threw him the ball a lot. what are we expecting from the Carlos Williams effect on LeSean McCoy? I mean, how do you draft McCoy? Do you have to spend? I mean, Williams is going to go too high for my taste, probably.
Maybe
He's going to be one of those
too high.
He's going to be an expensive handcuff.
But he's
Fifth
not
round?
He's not just a handcuff to me.
See that, but then you get into a whole nother debate. Like, so you're going to own both? Are you going to?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Who
goes higher? Carlos Williams goes a lot higher than Tevin Coleman will go, right?
Yes,
Okay.
because Tevin Coleman to me is
a pure handcuff?
Is a handcuff. Where Carlos Williams, you're talking about Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard. Would you consider either of those guys a handcuff?
No, but
because they both have standalone.
So how is
value.
McCoy a top 10?
Because there's enough there. I think. I think there's enough work to go around. He was on pace for 270 carries, about 1,200 yards, and 4 touchdowns and 43 catches.
So you must be the one that has him high, because I have him out of my top 12.
Let me look.
I have him at 13.5 points.
Yes, I do. I have him high. Let me see why I have him at projected for number 6.5 point. So I'm pulling up his numbers. I mean, I have him basically projected for around that pace, and because I think he still will be the primary guy. I know that Carlos Williams was great on a per touch basis, but it's one of those. I think that's the way Rex Ryan will coach. Is they gave McCoy the cash, they traded for him. Rex Ryan wanted him to be his guy, so he will be used as the guy.
I want to be number 12 on our list. I'm not going to say the name yet. Okay. Is number 12 on our list higher than LeSean McCoy for you? Probably not.
No,
okay.
Definitely not.
So I want to discuss the difference between McCoy and him when we get there.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about.
These are the worst teasers ever.
Well, okay, so it's Thomas Rawls.
Oh, right.
So we'll talk
now
about it now.
It's a spoiler.
Well, okay.
You can't win.
You're right. That's correct. So LeSean McCoy, number 10 on our list, basically tied with Eddie Lacy. Look, I've made my thoughts known on Eddie Lacy. He has let me down.
He did.
He has let the whole team down. Which reminds me of Mighty Ducks. You let the team down. You let me down. Let the whole team down too.
He really did. He let himself down.
So how can you just climb aboard Fat Eddie when you see a couple pictures of him getting skinnier, going to be in better shape? Yes, it's a contract year. But you're on board.
I am 100% on board because I have 2 years of proof that Eddie Lacy is a stud. He's on a high-powered offense. Am I jumping off of the Green Bay offense? Am I jumping off Aaron Rodgers because of one sort of down year? No freaking way. I'm all in on Green Bay. I think they're great. I think Jordy Nelson returns and is a huge factor. And Eddie Lacy, look, we've seen time and time and time again the contract year. Who was in a contract year this year that just got paid? Doug Martin, coming off of 2 embarrassing seasons, busts off 1,400 yards. There is that extra – when you're an elite athlete, sometimes it takes that – there's this extra little push to put you over the edge to be ready and play hard, and millions of dollars can give you that extra incentive.
There's a healthy debate on the merits of that argument for how you perceive a player. Because if a player is performing for you and you're expecting this season, look, you want to ask me a question of how I can evaluate Eddie Lacy. Let me see him have a good year last year, and then I can come in this year and say, you know what, Eddie Lacy's going to have another good year. I'd much prefer to do that than to say, boy, it's a contract year, so I really hope he doesn't disappoint me again. Yes, he has the years in the years past. And he's my number 12. Okay, he's right on that 1-2 cusp. I like the upside of a Thomas Rawls more than I do the possible disappointment of Lacy. Because let me tell you what.
Okay,
Lacy last year, it wasn't just a bust. It was this type of argument from you repeated for 8 weeks to start the year by everybody. This is the week. It's going to be this one. Oh, look at the matchup on the. This is the week, though. Week 4, here he comes. Oh, no. Week 5 is going to be the week. You know, I feel like it wasn't being burnt slow. It was being burnt slowly over and over and over again because the investment was so high. You start investing in Eddie Lacy very high. I'm just worried about that happening again. Does he have upside? Yes. Does he have a track record of being good enough? Yes. Does the offense should be better with Jordy Nelson back?
But the good enough, a tracker. Here is his track record.
You're saying it being top 5.
Here is his average in those first 2 years: 265 carries, 1,160 yards, 10 touchdowns, 39 catches for 340 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Wouldn't that have been the same argument that someone made in year 3 for Doug Martin?
No, because he was coming off of 2 back-to-back.
No. I'm saying in year 3, he came off 1 bad year.
Right, and that's why he was still drafted very high. That's why I said he burned people twice.
But my point is he burned people twice.
Yeah?
So I'm just saying there's a risk factor there that Eddie Lacy showed me he didn't come in healthy. I'm just saying you don't have a lot of options as a workhorse. Not a lot of guys could be that workhorse back. Lacy might be it, but to be fully on board with him, I'm not there.
But to compare him to Doug Martin, there's extra check boxes for Eddie Lacy.
Which is what?
High-powered offense, extremely high-powered offense. You cannot check that box for Tampa Bay. You can check it as a number 1 potential in Green Bay.
And last year you had what? One offense.
For what?
Green Bay.
I imagine they were still top 10.
Okay.
I can look it up.
So why will that help him this year versus last year if they were still top 10?
I'm talking about your argument of saying we should jump back in on Doug Martin. There's so many positives for Eddie Lacy compared to the upside that was Doug Martin.
Would you agree that for Eddie Lacy to succeed this year, he has to play better? Is that the main variable? He has to play better?
Sure. I mean,
but you expect him to do that? You expect him to lose weight and play better?
The main variable to me for Eddie Lacy is conditioning.
I'd love to hear the public opinion from our listeners, from the Foot Clan members, of kind of what their perception of Eddie Lacy is. Are you jumping back in? He's a bounce-back candidate just as much as an Andrew Luck or somebody else. And I'm not, he's number 12, right? For all those factors you mentioned. Big guy, contract year. But I'll back off of him.
But that's what I mean. So I talk about a lot of there's a guy and you have to make your decision. You say, I am okay to be burnt by this guy. And I am okay to miss on this guy. And Eddie Lacy is in your I will miss on Eddie Lacy. That doesn't make me feel bad.
Is there a value point, though, where you say no to that?
Yeah, everyone always has an extra value thing. But just for the most part, where I think Lacy will go in drafts is you won't get him. Where I will pay market price to get Eddie Lacy on my team.
Where's Lacy on your list?
Let me
compared to where we have him as a consensus number 11 here.
He is consensus number. Yeah, he is number 8 for me.
So you have him ahead of Shady?
No.
Who do you have him ahead of on our list? Freeman?
Yes, he's ahead of Freeman, and he is ahead
Lamar
of
Miller?
No, hold on. the guys remaining on the list is just Rawls. So I have him ahead of Rawls.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, he's number 8.
So Thomas Rawls, number 12. You and I were discussing this a little bit before when we were talking about David Johnson and the fact that David Johnson has the pass catching numbers that make you really, he could have a bad game on the ground. He could have a low carry count game, but the pass numbers kind of give him this baseline that's just,
Yes.
That's what makes Le'Veon Bell great. That's what made Jamal Charles great. So Thomas Rawls, why can't Thomas Rawls? Let me ask you this. This is a good way to do it. Why can't Thomas Rawls be a top 3 back?
A top 3 back?
Yeah. Because if you look statistically at his time starting, he led the league in yards per carry, right? I think he was 5.6 a carry.
Yeah, he was a monster. Yes.
Obviously got hurt, but why can't Thomas Rawls? Is he fall into that? If I drafted him as the 12th running back off the board, I've got nothing but upside, or do you see him having a significant downside too?
I see his variables very wide, and could he be a top 3 guy? I wouldn't say no. I mean, Doug Martin finished spectacularly with low touchdowns and low catches, and that's the concern for Rawls. There's just so many right now at this moment of the low catches. He doesn't have a history of it in college. He doesn't have a history of it last year. Even in his starts, they weren't using him that way. He was a monster on the ground, and having Russell Wilson, we've seen the effect that a mobile quarterback gives a running back, gives him a huge edge. So that's kind of where you get this a slight uptick in the floor, where if he's not catching passes, he at least has that factor. But
without the injury, though, do you think the shine came off with the injury?
Sure,
and
because
the
shine was the injury was pretty rough. You're talking he broke his ankle.
Carroll still says hopefully he'll be ready for training camp.
Yeah, that's not what you want to hear for a guy who is an undrafted rookie, is not locked in to his spot, and people will laugh and scoff. They did re-sign Christine Michael, who we saw was decently productive in the time that Rawls was out. So what do I see in training camp? Let's say Rawls comes in, he's healthy, Michael is there healthy. I think Rawls will take the job and Michael will be the backup. But we're talking early rankings, and I guess I haven't taken a side yet of
it's more of a wait.
Am I projecting Rawls as the starter, the official guy for Seattle? I'm not doing that yet.
He could move up a lot for me.
Yes.
Is the potential, because
I will agree with that.
If he's healthy and if he's got the job, because there's a really, I think, a better argument to say Christine Michael coming back is a great sign for Rawls versus them going out and signing somebody that could be a workhorse.
That's fair.
A first, Michael's shown me from being cut by traded by Seattle.
He got traded
by Seattle, cut by Washington's practice squad. That Rawls could just run away with it, literally. But you're right. Right now, the question marks for David Johnson aren't there that they are for Rawls.
Yeah, and that's what's weird is you.
But you don't want to forget him either.
Same.
You don't want to. That's what I mean.
They're in the same boat of
limited workload.
The sample size is about 5 or 6 games for both.
Right. That's the truth, and that's why I want to bring it up, because here you have David Johnson number 2, you got Thomas Rawls number
and I'm sure
12, and he could move up into that steal. He could be a steal for somebody.
I'm sure plenty of listeners have that argument of why do you guys love David Johnson and not automatically love Rawls when the sample size is so small? And to me, it's the catching and the offense,
the pass catching. I think Rawls will end up ahead of Lacy and McCoy for me, and maybe nobody else from my list. Maybe a little bit higher, but you're right. The receptions just keep him down unless I'm playing in a pure standard league or something, because I do like the fact he's on Seattle and he's ferocious and he gets in the end zone if you gave him that goal line carry. So that is it. So let me run through our top 12 real quick. Lev Bell, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Jamal Charles, Adrian Peterson, Mark Ingram, Lamar Miller, Devonta Freeman, Doug Martin, LeSean McCoy, Eddie Lacy, and Thomas Rawls. And since we won't be doing another running back show immediately, should we mention kind of the next few guys on that list?
Yeah, if you want. Why not?
So if you didn't hear their name, obviously, then they're let's see where we're at. Thomas Rawls was 12. Then we had DeMarco Murray, C.J. Anderson. We have Forte, Hyde, Jonathan Stewart, Langford, and Deion Lewis. And that's about as far as I'll go for now. And I think Lewis's number might rise in our group too.
It might. He's
got the same type of hesitation that Rawls has.
I dropped Deion a bit.
Yeah.
And the only
it's fair.
The only guy I want to touch on real quick is Forte, because I have this complete gut. This is complete gut. Like I have nothing to stand on for this argument except for feeling. I feel that Forte is going to burn people.
It's very possible.
Like, it's just
people had expectations for Chris Johnson there. They had expectations for LaDainian Tomlinson there. But when you go to that second home, how often does that work out into a fantasy business?
Older guy changing systems. Bilal Powell is there, and people, do not shake your head at Bilal Powell. They love him, and he was great, and he was paid nearly identical to Matt Forte, and Kyrie Robinson's there. I mean, there's capable guys there. Maybe those are the factors of it. However, it just is like there's not a ton of evidence for me to stand on right now, other than my gut is saying
Be careful.
Be careful with Forte, especially like, oh, I'm going to go wide receiver,
and then he's your
and
one.
Forte is going to be my one.
Yeah,
like,
that would.
Like, I don't know if that's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't want him as my one. I'll tell you that right now. All right, let's move on to the mailbag.
Mailbag.
Man, you psyched me out with that intro. I didn't know where
was
we
it
were
different singing the mailbag from Jason's seat? Are there different echoes?
Might have been a little pitchy. We'll listen to the playback. When I say that, I'm just trying to make a joke because I'm never pitchy. America.
I know.
Never.
Never. All right, welcome to the mailbag. If you got a question, you can go to the website, thefantasyfootballers.com, click on the Submit a Question button, or you can dial our voicemail hotline, 302-464-TFFB. We love answering questions from the listeners. That's why we do this. So let's go ahead and answer a voicemail question right now.
Hey, guys, just a quick commissioner question. We try to do a live draft every year. Past 2 years, we have a guy who just refuses to come down into town to do the draft, so we have to actually call him up every time it's his pick or text him and let him know what's going on. He's not even really a friend. He's just kind of like a fill-in. My brother, who's in the league, it's his buddy. Question is, if he refuses to do it this year again, should we just like kind of kick him out of the league, let him know what's up? Other stipulation is he actually ended up winning the league this year, so kind of puts us in a pickle. You don't want to kick out the champion, but I mean, we really want to do a live draft without having to call everybody. Thanks for any of the help that you can give.
Oh man, it would seem just the ultimate sour grapes.
I think my answer after I thought about it was that you're screwed.
No,
I don't think you can boot him out.
Here's my answer. Because we do our main league, we do the live draft, and
we require it
because you must be in attendance. Attendance is mandatory, or you're out. That's one of our rules. However, we are also understanding that most of us are located in Arizona. We have a couple guys who live elsewhere, but you know what they do? They Skype into the draft. They are a part of the draft.
They are virtually present.
Maybe they're not physically in the room with you, but they know what's going on. They hear every single pick. They are there. So you got to get the tech set up, get someone's laptop, Skype that person in so that they can hear everything that is going on because, man, I can't even imagine have to call somebody up. Hey, you're on the clock. Okay, I'll take this guy. No, they're gone. Is this guy there? No, they're gone.
Oh, I would never do it.
So you I wouldn't settle for that anymore. He has to live be there. It virtually or in person, or to me, he's out. I don't care that you won.
All right. Hopefully that helps. He can play the video or play the audio.
Hey, fellas, this is Kyle from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Just got a 10-team standard league keeper. I get to pick 2. So this is my question. Do I keep Jordy Nelson for a 5th, Arian Foster for a 5th, Tom Brady for a 5th, or Jordan Reed for a 5th, or do I keep Adrian Peterson for a 3rd or Hopkins for a 3rd? So pick 2 of all those guys. Thanks. Bye.
All right.
Well, I'm guessing you can't keep any of the 5s together and any of the 3s together.
The way it sounded was he was saying pick 2, so I'm guessing that it would be a 5 and a 6. One would
or
slide
a 3 and a 4.
It would be a 3 and a 5, 3 and a 4, or 5 and a 6, depending on
right.
how we go
so
about it.
Nelson, Foster, Brady, and Reed were all for 5s, and Peterson, Hopkins were for 3s.
That is correct.
Peterson's locked.
Locked in for me.
So Hopkins or Nelson.
That's where I'm leaning, and man, I think it would just I don't want to be safe guy, Mr. Captain Safety over here, but Hopkins in a 4, Jordy in a 5, value very negligible. So I would go with the guy who didn't tear his ACL probably, and that would be Hopkins.
That's really, really close. So you end up buying yourself a 4th. You keep your 4th around in that situation, right? No, you said Hopkins, so you would lose the 4th.
Yeah, I would go. I'd pay the 3 and the 4 for.
Yeah, I'd probably do.
I don't mind going Jordy there at all, but it's just if you're making me choose today,
yeah,
I'll take Hopkins.
All right, Danny in Orlando is in an auction draft league of 3 years. He is the reigning champ,
Yes.
Foot Clan title. He's going from inverse standing waivers to a fab system.
Congratulations.
My question is, should the leftover money from the $200 auction draft budget, if not used, be rolled over into the extra money for the free agent budget, or should everyone start with the same amount of money?
That is interesting, and I believe we talked about that in our auction league.
It is not a should to me. It's just both are fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you do it, you need to obviously explain it well in advance so that it can be a strategy, because that's what I would see it as is, do you start to strategically think about that during the draft when you're making picks? I kind of like it. I mean, if you just ask me, I just kind of like it.
I kind of like it too, because I love adding in these tiny little there's things that seem tiny and auxiliary, but they end up turning into these kind of bigger strategy things that you can think of and play with different ideas. So I'm all for it. If the question is should you do it, that's up to you and your league. It's all about, remember, people, fun. We're here to have fun.
Right.
So if that makes it more fun to you, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and I would just poll the league, see what they want to do. Say, hey, here's 2 options that we have.
And then the people who vote against it said that's a vote against fun.
Right.
And you shame them.
Yeah, obviously. So Sean in San Antonio, Texas, I can keep 2, maybe 3 pending. What does he say? I can keep 2, maybe 3 pending league vote.
I don't like it. I don't like it, Sean.
For keepers. Okay, so he's got, we can just put them in order for him.
Okay.
Brandon Marshall for a 4th, Mike Evans for a 9th.
Oh, come on.
Sorry, that just looks
Come on,
great.
Sean.
Next 3 are waiver pick ads, so they are 10th round.
Okay.
Rawls and Langford and David Johnson, I'm guessing. That must be David Johnson with
the music
notes, because he said 3 other guys. I'm almost 100% sure that's what he meant. David Johnson's now being represented by music notes only.
He's like Prince. He's just a symbol.
All right, so Rawls, Langford. I mean, look, I think it's David Johnson.
Yes.
For the 10th.
That's a lock.
And Evans.
That is also a lock.
So, and then you just, I don't know, you dance to this tune all the way to the draft.
Who's your 3rd?
It's Rawls.
Yeah, it's likely Rawls for me.
Yeah.
As well. And if it's not Rawls, it's, I mean, between Marshall in the 4th
or Langford in the 10th, I would probably just take Marshall.
I'd probably go Marshall there as well. And I'm just going to take a second. I am extremely excited for Mike Evans. I was just starting out my statting of the wide receivers, and
he had such a good year that nobody
Yes. And
nobody felt in the fantasy world.
Because he only had a couple touchdowns.
Because you could easily argue, I mean, you might hear this from us. He might be your number 1. He might be your number 2.
It could be.
Maybe not 1.
Yeah, that's a stretch over
but
Antonio
when you
Brown.
have,
it's not happening.
Here's what's nice. Here's a play. Brandon Marshall's not finishing the number 1 wide receiver ever.
Right.
Someone like Mike Evans could. Someone like Mike Evans could be what Josh Gordon was 2 years ago, where he's number 1. He's the number 1 wide receiver at this value that just wasn't.
He has the talent. He has
no
longer a rookie quarterback.
Mike Evans in the 2nd or 3rd.
And I was talking with Matt Harmon. Like, Matt Harmon keeps coming up on the show. You're welcome, Harmon. But he was tweeting out about he's going over Mike Evans for his reception perception. He's getting blown away. I was like, man, that was the timing of it was the universe
blown away by his stats last year.
Coming together. No, by his tape.
Oh, I got you.
Harmon's saying watching his tape. He's like, Evans looks great, and I had just statted Evans, and I was super excited about him. Kind of, just in my car driving, Mike Evans,
right?
Mike
yeah,
Evans.
You sing everything.
Yeah, well, that's my life. That's my
true.
life. But it was just it was the universe coming together.
Now, would you call
great.
If you sing Mike Evans and you watch him drop the ball in the field, would you say he's pitchy then? Is his game pitchy? Does he have a pitchy game? Because if he left so many yards on the field with these just disgusting drops.
And you know what? Don't care.
Don't care. Doesn't matter. It's funny how we look at players sometimes.
One argument for a guy is in the one argument against the guy.
One of these days, we're going to have a segment on the show where we assign a player to the other person to have to argue for them. for
That's
like
dirty.
a minute.
What are we going, debate club?
Right. I'm going to give you Joik Bell. I'm going to tell you that right now. You give me your best 1 minute on why Joik
tell you
Bell's
what,
elite.
You give me Joik Bell, I will throw the competition.
You'll still trash on him.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd rather lose than support Joik Bell.
Yeah, you're committed. You're a committed man. All right, that's it for today's show. We'll be back next Tuesday, hopefully with our third member.
With the
Eye patch, hopefully as well.
The fantasy pirate.
Man.
Yarr.
Yeah, so send him a note on Twitter. I'm sure he'd love to hear from everybody out there. We do have the show after the show on YouTube, so stay tuned. Today we're going to let Mike rant about April Fool's Day. So you don't want to miss this because I've heard it before in years past, and every time April Fool's Day gets here, we need to hear it again. So we're going to put it on YouTube, and you can go subscribe to the show on there. All the episodes of the show are obviously on iTunes, Stitcher. We're on Spotify now, all the different podcast destinations, but we're also on YouTube and on the Fantasy Sports Network.
Hey,
so
Google.
We're not hard to find.
Google. Get that Google Play Music podcast going.
As soon as podcasts are live in Google Play, we will be there. We're just sitting. Literally, we're approved and it's waiting and it's on and it just has to show up in your phone. So if you got an Android device and you're like, man, I hate going to the website or I hate downloading a separate app, it's coming to Google Play. It'll be here very soon. Just not yet. We're just waiting. So
we're all slaves to Google.
Yeah. So stay tuned. Show after the show. We'll be back next Tuesday. We're talking wide receivers. Gonna have a bunch of news for you. We're inching closer to the draft, Mike.
Oh, what? Draft? Yeah. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.